Okay. Bit like a bushcraft knife. So the Western backsword is this sort of same with certain types of saber, and well, most backswords, if not all, or near almost all, have a flat back or a slab style back. And you can see it in the K98 bayonet, the single-edged one from World War II, and anything along those lines. So the the Western style single edges tend to have this sort of flat back or slab style spine, with a bit like a bushcraft knife with this sort of 90-degree kind of thing, and not 100%, but like 99% ish, roughly. Nearly all, like vast majority. So in general, absolutely yes, and they the Japanese Western style backsword compared to the Japanese single-edged swords. The Japanese has like a ridge line, a center ridge line, and then two like slight slopes. If you look at the spine of a wakizashi and a katana, you'll see this very, very specific type of spine, very specific, unique, niche, if you want, very specific to their nationality. That I don't really think the West has that. This very specific, and I'm not even sure even if Chinese blades have it. Chinese single edge ones like Dao, they can maybe have a type of a flat back as well. I'm not 100% sure what, but I think they can have that. But again, the Japanese have this very, very, very specific type of spine on the non-edge side, which is this center ridge line and then these two sort of slopes. You'll know what I mean. Look at the channel Alien Tude with the pink handled wakizashi, which is very good. It looks like toy swords when I was a kid on the shelf in like plastic toy swords, like ninja swords. But yeah. Um, Again, I'm not saying all, but I'd say vast majority, 99.895% have this style, and yeah, I wonder why. And then there's this stereotype, isn't there, that the Western way is a more vague. You know, there are elements of truth in that. If you look at Western boxing and Western wrestling compared to both kung fu and karate, there is much more codification in the Eastern systems, at least on the surface. At least on the surface. I think the reason for that is a much more practical or pragmatic approach. Utilitarian, if you want to use a Western philosophy term. That they say Western pugilism and Western boxing and Western wrestling, that it's more to the point. Like, you'll have a no-gi double leg or a no-gi single leg, or you'll have very basic names for things. Whereas in Kung Fu, you'll have, like, golden monkey's paw versus Buddha's palm or something. But also, yeah, it's a very sort of utilitarian, pragmatic thing. So it's like it's actually the Western style pugilism and Western boxing. The mentality is kind of similar to Wing Chun in a way. There's not. There's much more emphasis on pragmatic and practical over the flamboyant and the too many techniques and too many varieties. There's a much more, like, what is it, master of one rather than jack of all, styles. It's like very. And the Japanese have that a bit with karate and with Shotokan, with mainline karate and with Shotokan. This sort of mastering of a handful rather than doing loads, doing too many. So there is an element of truth to why it's a bit more vague in the West, and I think because they're not really interested. It's much more interested in the practical, and it's much more physicalistic because it lost the metaphysical side. Whereas you can even see, even though the Japanese have a more emphasis on the pragmatic than the Chinese kung fu in some circumstances, they um, they have what's the word? Yeah, some systems of kung fu might have too many techniques, or the Western style and Wing Chun, they both have this strong emphasis on this small handful of techniques, which there's good to that. So it's not that you can't find that pragmatic approach in Chinese kung fu, because it is there, and that our Southern Mantis can do it too. There's very back make one. There's very zingy one. Even there's very sort of like a longitudinal wave, a punch, which sounds like a shockwave, like a straight punch or a vertical fist punch, which sends a shockwave. So there is, and same with the back May fist, the Phoenix knuckle fist. There is there is systems like the center line systems that have a very sort of straight to the jugular approach. So it's not that you can't get that. But in general, yeah, the West have a more pragmatic approach, but it's why they don't have, like, the samurai masks. Maybe not as technologically, say some people might say the technological advances, say Western armor from the same period, but the more metaphysical. Whereas the Western one is, again, I'm not saying it isn't metaphysical, but it is more the union between the spiritual and the physical is less. You can it's very metal, and there's not much. Whereas with the samurai, there's like the demons and the onai, the Japanese onai demon mask and things like that, and other antler masks, anthropomorphic, where I think the West lost it a bit on the metaphysical side, whereas the samurai martial arts and the Chinese martial arts still had that, So, yeah, it's just the difference between the very sort of practical, like small handful of maybe ugly moves that work versus this bigger repertoire. It's almost just a different mindset or attitude, or just the way different nationalities see things. It's not about right versus wrong necessarily. But just to come back to the swords, as I say, maybe the flat or slab back is to do with that, where people say the West is a bit more vague or oversimplified or too simplified versus the other, which is very codified, and there's exceptions on both sides, and there's also there's a general pattern of that, I think, that's true, but bearing in mind that there are exceptions on both sides. So yes, you could use the word, if you wanted to, straight saber. Because it's a sort of a straight saber or a proto saber from, say, the 1600s, etc. Yeah, I don't know enough about them, but this is just an autistic response to the AHF, really on it's not necessarily a response, more of just the ramblings about the, the flat back, and is it oversimplified, and why did they come to that style, because again it's less codified than Japanese, right? At least on the surface. So yeah, maybe people know why it's just completely flat and like no decoration, and much more, again, some people want to say vague, or some people want to say oversimplified, very basic shape versus the Japanese very specific shape. I don't know why. AHF might know, but this is just, wondering why. Again, some people might say the West was more vague on it, why they have slab backs or flat backs on the Western backsword blades. Yeah, just any thoughts? I don't know really, but this is my autistic response to the AHF, so there you go.